If you find job interviews in English quite difficult, it could be the small words that are causing you problems. Let's take a look at the 8 most common mistakes people make in English job interviews and how to fix them. I'm Francis from Last Minute English. There's a saying in English, you don't get a second chance at first impressions. And that's very true in job interviews. It's a great opportunity to make a great first impression, but if you make a bad first impression, it's hard to recover. Your experience and your qualifications might get you to the interview, but it's your English language skills that get you the job. So today we're focusing on 8 words that you should avoid when you're taking your English job interview. So let's jump straight in with number 1. Now, you've got the interview and you might want to present yourself as very confident and capable. And so when the interviewer asks you, are you able to lead a team? You could say something like, oh, no problem. But saying no problem can be a problem. You want to sound confident, but really you sound dismissive. You sound too confident. So instead, you could answer things like, of course, or oh, I'm glad you asked that, or certainly. And those are all good because they're a little bit more polite and they're more professional. No problem is not a very professional phrase, but the other 3 are going to give a better impression to the interviewer. The second word to avoid is, let's say you walk into the room and there are several people waiting to give you the interview, and you say, great to meet you guys. And it seems like an okay thing to say. Great to meet you guys. But the problem could be with the word guys. Now the problem comes because some people use guys to mean all men, and other people use guys to mean both men and women. So it can cause a little bit of confusion and it could be a little bit too sensitive to use. Plus, it's quite an informal word. So instead, I want you to use the phrase, it's great to meet you all. It's great to meet you all. Tip number 3 is if you say, I think or I feel when you're giving your opinion about something. Now, this is not one of those channels where I say, don't say I think, say something else. I think is an okay phrase. But what I don't want you to do is keep using it again and again and again. I think, I think, I think, I think, I think. Really, you have to show your variety in your language. So let's look at a few other ways to say I think. You could say, in my experience, from my perspective, in my opinion, or a longer one, as far as I'm concerned. And if you mix those ones in with your I think and I feel, I believe, you'll have much more variety, and so your answers will seem linguistically, like in language, much more sophisticated. Now the 4th phrase is a filler. It's kind of a habit that the speaker doesn't even really know that they're using. You know what I mean? And that phrase is, you know what I mean? Now, quite often this is added to the end of a sentence or the end of a story, but it makes you seem a little bit unsure, a little bit uncertain, like you're always checking if the interviewer understands you. It doesn't show you as very confident. So we want to try to avoid using phrases like that. You know what I mean? So for example, instead of saying, working as a receptionist for the last 2 years means I'm great with computers, if you know what I mean. We can replace that, we get rid of if you know what I mean, and we can also use a few fancier words. So you could say, in my role as a receptionist, I acquired significant expertise in various software programs, including Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. Now your answers don't always have to be as fancy as that, but that's a good example that you can copy. Then tip number 5 is not exactly a word, it's more like a cultural idea, and that is being too humble. So quite often in many different cultures, including in British culture, we tend to put ourselves down. That means we use language that makes our true ability seem lower than it really is. So you might say things like, oh, I'm just something, or I don't have too much expertise in this area. Or they ask you, are you good at something? And you say, well, it's not one of my biggest strengths, or I'm not an expert in that area. Now, most of the time that's okay. Like in normal life, I think that's pretty good to be quite humble. But of course, don't do it too much in your job interview. You want to use words to make yourself more confident, to show your true ability. Then tip number 6, you should avoid talking badly about your previous job or your previous colleagues. So even when an experience was quite difficult, you really didn't like working there, we can't stick the knife in. We can't be too rude about the people who we worked with before. So for example, instead of saying, well, in my last job, my manager made us work every hour of the day and he didn't pay us for overtime, you could say, my last job taught me the importance of time management and adaptability, which I can bring to this new role. Much more professional. Or, my last company was only interested in profit. They didn't care about the customers. That wouldn't give a great impression to the interviewers. So instead, you could say, while my last company had a different approach to customer service, I gained valuable insights into the impact of personalized interactions. So really, it's the same thing more or less that we're saying, but we're not being rude, being undiplomatic about our last employer, and that gives a much better impression of us to the interviewer. Tip number 7 is to avoid kind of and sort of. So both of these are very natural English, and in daily English, they're absolutely fine to use. But in a job interview, you want to give this idea that you are confident and capable. But using kind of and sort of kind of shows you as unconfident and incapable. So they're pretty important words to avoid. For example, if the interviewer asks, do you have any experience in project management? You could say, sort of. I've kind of done a bit of work in that, but I'm definitely not an expert. So that really gives a pretty negative, a pretty weak impression. Let's see how we could give that answer. So you could say, yes, I have experience of project management. I've worked on several different projects throughout my career. While I may not have had the title of project manager, I have successfully led and managed projects from initiation to completion. So that's definitely going to sound a lot more confident than saying, sort of, I kind of have project management experience. Then tip 8 is something that's kind of obvious, but it's worth focusing on. And that is that you mustn't swear or use rude words in the interview. Now, this usually wouldn't be a problem if you're going for a very formal interview and you're wearing like a suit or like a formal dress and everybody is very serious and talking in a very polite and formal way. Of course, then you won't be tempted to use rude words. But the danger is if it's a very casual interview and everybody feels relaxed, maybe it's just you and one other person, and you think, well, you get into your very casual way of talking, more like your daily English way of talking, and a swear word might slip out. But even in that situation, if it's very casual, avoid it. Avoid using those rude words. And if you're not sure which words are acceptable in English and which ones are rude words, we have a video for that. The link is just under here. So there we go. Those are 8 words and phrases and types of speaking that we should avoid when we are doing our English job interviews. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe down here. We also have lots of videos all about taking English exams like IELTS and Duolingo and helping you reach advanced level English. So make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. I'm Francis from Last Minute English. Thank you for watching. See you next time.